Hi there, I'm Isanali A. Shaw, and you're watching me on YouTube and Facebook Live. Today, we are going to talk about a very important and interesting question. And the question Is globalization becoming a control intelligence? If yes, then how? Is globalization mean conformity to the mainstream technology and information that whatever we are told. Speaking of globalization, if you want to learn about globalization, we have done a complete series comprising of 9 episodes. Just click on the link below in the description and check it out the whole series. Uh, and now the question is globalization becoming a mind control? Then, if how you think, leave it in the comment box and we'll discuss it further. Or when we talk about mind control and intelligence, then the only thing comes to our mind, the most uh, obvious thing comes to our mind is the IQ test. Now the question is, what is the authenticity and validity of the IQ test? It might be wrong. Many people miss. It might be right or wrong. It depends how you interpret it. Uh, and many people misinterpret it with the IQ test. They think that it is the ultimate test for the intelligence. But many researchers, many studies have shown recently that it is not. Now, I think we should go back to our guest and discuss it further in detail. If you have any question, leave it in the comment box below and we will discuss it in detail. Okay.
Yeah, hi
Hi,
everybody.
Ed. Hi, Ed.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a nice day,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
feel good. So
Okay.
yeah,
What
I'm
about
doing
the
good.
what about the weather? How is weather there?
The weather's pretty good. We were lucky. We were 2 or 3 degrees above freezing, so we didn't
Hmm.
get ice. A
Hmm.
large part of the United States got ice and lost
Hmm.
its power. There's about
Hmm.
5 million people without electrical power,
Hmm. Okay.
including
And
water.
on the mhm. On the other hand, the weather here is changing, and I'm not wearing shirt. I'm not going wearing any sweater today. See, and I'm just wearing a shirt, and it's changing. And yeah, the weather is changing. There's been no rains. We desperately need rains for the crops to grow and feed us for the next year, for this year. So,
Yeah,
come back to
yeah.
our,
Drought is very serious.
yeah, drought is very serious.
I mean, I have my
And
own theory. I
yeah,
think,
okay,
I mean, I'm
okay,
going to sound totally ridiculous, but I think
okay.
clouds are consciousness and
Mm-hmm,
they're drawn to new ideas. And when people don't change their thinking, it's a
mm-hmm,
drought, which is they don't
mm-hmm,
have any
mm-hmm,
resource of new ideas, which is the
mm-hmm,
rain represents a new generation of,
mm-hmm,
of plants and animals developing. And when you don't
mm-hmm,
have new ideas, you have a desert.
mm-hmm. So it's like a drought. We need
Yeah.
rains. We need steady, like a rain, to to uh, to fertile our mind, to make
Yes.
it productive. Yes. And now we should come back to our question. Is globalization means control intelligence?
I think so. I think we need a broader definition of intelligence because,
Mm-hmm,
as you mentioned, the IQ test is really based on language skills.
mm-hmm,
If you don't understand a word in a question on an IQ test, it can throw off your IQ test. When
mm-hmm,
I was a teenager and I was going to be a psychologist,
mm-hmm,
a lot of children were diagnosed as retarded or low IQ, and
mm-hmm,
some researchers spent time working on language and found they had normal IQ, that for some reason when they were like 2 years of age or 1 year of age,
Hmm.
um,
So it
they
is like
failed
a,
to develop language skills. Language
mhm,
skills are critical to do
mhm.
well on an IQ test.
So IQ test could be biased. It could be a cultural bias. It could be some other kind of a bias because different cultures have different. They teach different methods of teaching, and they teach different things. Just like the Bolivian in the Bolivian culture, they don't teach the sign, the shapes. They don't give labels to the shapes. Okay, if the intelligence test or the IQ test is about shapes and labeling, then they would perform poorly. On the other hand, if the IQ test is about something else, then they will perform better.
Yes, so and that's the way it's traditionally interpreted by people who are critical of
Hmm.
IQ tests. I would say I take it a step further. Is IQ test is based on language skills, and those
Hmm.
language skills are based on culture.
Hmm.
So you can prepare for an IQ test. You can raise your
Hmm.
IQ by
Hmm.
preparing, just like
Hmm.
people, a college test called
Hmm.
SATs, or there's
Hmm.
standardized testing for college, and you can prepare for it and get a higher
Hmm.
score.
Just like it reminds me uh, a study. I don't know how you pronounce it. Is Stephen Piantadosa or how you pronounce it? Piantadosa? Am I pronouncing it
I,
right?
I don't know. You would have to spell the
Uh,
name.
Piantodesa. I think
Yeah, I'm not familiar
Piantadosa.
with him. I'm not that familiar with him because I wasn't researching today for specifically the IQ test, though I wanted to mention it because it's not totally accurate.
Okay, okay. Speaking of, it is relevant to your statement earlier that you said is if you compare, and he said the same thing that intelligence tests are or the IQ tests are like contest. They based on your motivation. If you train your mind well, then you would get higher score in the IQ test. If you don't, then you will perform low. So the question is IQ test really examine your intelligence? I don't know. What do you
Well,
think?
I think it examines your level of interaction with the culture, which
Mm-hmm.
is a good student, quote good student,
Mm-hmm.
is going to interact with the current literature, scientific material,
Mm-hmm.
textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
But academic knowledge is not always the fundamental concept of IQ. There's
Mm-hmm.
intuition, there's a lot of other senses involved in intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But intelligence, what I really want to get to, the point that I mentioned with IQ,
Mm-hmm.
was you can't really accurately measure intelligence.
Yes.
You know, we can measure your weight, we can
Mm-hmm.
measure your height
Mm-hmm.
to, plus or minus 2% or 3%,
Mm-hmm.
it may vary within a
Mm-hmm.
day or two. But IQ varies immediately.
Yes.
And there's a term, idiot savant, which
Mm-hmm.
means a lot of people who are very good in music or good in math or good in
Mm-hmm.
science
Mm-hmm.
may not be good in other subjects,
Yes.
which is people train their intelligence in an area. It could be an area such as a builder. Person may
Mm-hmm.
be a good carpenter, but then when they go over into music, they don't really understand harmony, chord progressions because they're not
Mm-hmm.
trained in it. So,
Yes. Okay. Speaking of, you said a very interesting thing. Okay, for instance, my field is business and a little about technology. If you talk about medicine or pharmaceutical industry or about some other thing, then I would be very weak in it. Just like in the previous episode, we were talking about globalization, history of globalization, and I was history, and I love history. I love reading about it, but it is not my field. So in the earlier in the few episode, I was a bit poor. Okay, I hate to admit, but it's true. I wasn't doing very good in the history. As soon as we come to the current globalization and modern age, okay, then it is come to my understanding and my field. So I completely get it when you say, uh, if it's relevant to your field, and then you perform well. Otherwise, it's relevant to the culture.
Yes. What I want to do is redefine intelligence. And
Hmm.
I think intelligence is organized energy. It's like a potential energy.
Hmm.
And no one that I know describes intelligence like I do. I want to give you
Okay.
an example. If I have a rock and I lift it
Hmm.
high up, it has potential energy, which is I let go, the
Hmm.
rock falls, and through the
Hmm.
collision is going to create heat,
Hmm.
which is by lifting that rock up. And we can't measure any extra energy
Hmm.
because the energy is actually in the space between the rock and the earth and the gravitational field. But I
Hmm.
put energy into that rock and you can't measure it.
Hmm.
The rock is still the rock. But if you
Yes.
let it go, when it hits the surface, it could be water. Let's say, just so that people can see this better, if I let that rock go and it splashes into water, the water is going to splash. It's
Yeah.
going to be basically animated or pushed by the energy of the rock. But while
Hmm.
the rock is up here,
Hmm.
unless I know the distance from the ground, I have
Hmm.
no idea how much potential energy it is. I can't measure it unless I have the distance between it and the ground measured, and of course, the gravitational force. So
Hmm.
we have potential energy,
Hmm.
which is not in the rock.
Hmm.
So I lift the rock up. It has
Hmm.
potential energy. If I let it fall, I lifted it up from water. It's going to come down in the water. The water is going to be propelled by the energy, but that
Hmm.
energy I can't measure. It's in the distance. If
Hmm.
I can't measure the distance, I can't measure the energy. So the energy is not in the rock. Isn't that
Hmm.
strange?
Yes.
So we lift the rock up. The energy is
Hmm.
not in there, but there is energy because I let it
Hmm.
fall and it hits a puddle or it hits a tub of water. The water's going to splash out because when I lifted it up, I added energy to the rock. That rock is called potential energy, but I can't
Hmm.
measure it at the rock. It's the
Yes.
same thing with intelligence. Let's say
Hmm.
I do play the piano, so I
Hmm.
practice a difficult concert piece. Let's say Chopin etudes or the preludes,
Hmm.
and I spend 1,000 hours practicing it. Well, you don't
Hmm.
see it in my brain 1,000 hours. When I go play the piano, you hear the skill. The same thing with a
Hmm.
car mechanic. The car mechanic has the skill of diagnosing the problem, they go in and they know immediately the problem is a clogged fuel injector.
Hmm.
So they go and clean the fuel injector. Someone may think it's the battery, the alternator. They may think it's the computer, but a
Hmm.
mechanic has that stored information where instead of taking 4 or 5 hours to fix the car, the mechanic can
Hmm.
fix it in 10 minutes.
Hmm.
But that's like the rock having potential energy. We can't measure it at the rock
Hmm.
because it's in the distance, and we can't
Hmm.
measure intelligence.
Hmm.
I mean, we can attempt to measure intelligence, but it
But
doesn't always work.
yes,
Now, the
it's a
second thing,
it's like it's like a probability. It may work or it may not.
yeah, there's a certain amount of probability in it, and that
Hmm.
has to do with organization. If
Hmm.
I have a puzzle, uh,
Hmm.
a And it could be, what do they call them? A jigsaw puzzle, which
Mhm.
is called a jigsaw because you take a picture on cardboard and you cut up little pieces. So I have a
Mhm.
picture of a barn or a picture of a mountain, and I drop
Mhm.
the puzzle. The puzzle
Mhm.
falls into pieces,
Mhm.
which is the energy was used to destroy the energy to put it together. Now, for me to put it together, I need energy to put it together to see the picture again.
Mhm.
And so intelligence is organized energy. And it's a very difficult thing because it's almost impossible to accurately measure organized energy. I'm going to give you an example.
Mhm. Okay.
If I wanted to plow a field, I
Mhm.
could have a tractor pull a plow,
Mhm.
and that has energy.
Mhm.
I could have a cow or an ox pull the plow or a horse.
Mhm.
Or I could use a hoe and slowly hoe through the field to aerate it.
Mhm.
But I don't have an engine in me.
Mhm.
Neither does the cow. I mean,
Mhm.
you have to put gasoline, a certain amount of energy in the tractor for the tractor to pull the plow. But for me to use the hoe, I have to eat. But people require a different amount of food given their size, given how much food. I know I can reduce my food to 50% and
Mhm.
not lose weight
Mhm.
because the body adjusts to less food. But
Mhm.
getting back, so I could have an electric motor. The
Mhm.
electric motor could be a lift like on the back of a truck. I'm delivering refrigerators and I
Mhm.
have a lift on the back of the truck to lift up, and then the refrigerator goes on the lift. I bring the lift down, and that's usually a power takeoff. It's electricity, and you could measure the amount of electricity, which is going to be, a lot of voltage and current to bring
Mhm.
that refrigerator down. We do the
Mhm.
same thing in our houses. I mean, we plug in a vacuum cleaner. We get
Mhm.
around 100 volts or 120 or 220, depending on what country you're in.
Mhm.
But we could sweep the floor. We could take a
Mhm.
broom and sweep the floor. We can lift up the refrigerator. It might take two people,
Mhm.
but we don't plug into an outlet.
Mhm.
And if you took an electric meter and try to measure with the two probes or contacts or voltage or current, and you're not going to measure hardly anything.
Mhm.
So
So
how
the
could we
same.
behave as
Yes.
strong as a 220-volt machine, and we don't have any voltage you can measure? And it's
Mhm.
because each of our cells, particularly in our muscles, have tiny little voltages and currents that we organize.
Mhm.
So we can barely measure the current or voltage, but if you organize it, it becomes as strong as a lift, becomes as
Mhm.
strong as a vacuum cleaner, but we're
Mhm.
not plugged in. You can't measure the energy.
Yes.
So what intelligence is organized energy. So we can lift up, 100 pounds with our hand.
Mhm.
Can't measure the voltage. It is electricity. The energy that we use to lift something is electricity. It's so well organized, we can't measure the voltage or the current. I mean, we can in one little place or two little places, but it's not like plugging in a machine that can do the work for us. And so
What
our
about
intel
what about the electricity that we use in our houses? We can measure it.
we can do what?
Measure it. We can.
We can
Uh,
measure it, but we can't quite measure the amount of electricity we're using
hmm.
because it's
So
subtle. It's
yeah.
organized. See,
Mhm.
most
It's
energy is
it,
growth.
it's like a unit, percentage of unit you have consumed. They have a meter outside of your house, and they measure it.
Yeah, they have a meter and we don't have one. For example, our
Mhm.
motor of our body can
Mhm.
go basically as like a moped or a small motorcycle. Not as fast, but
Mhm.
probably almost as far. Of course, you have to eat again or put in fuel, but you can't measure the RPM of our body. You can't measure the characteristic.
Mhm.
And and we can look at a tractor and you can look at a cow or an oxen and they can be almost as strong, but you're not going to have a motor there. You're not
Mhm.
going to have gasoline you pour in it.
Mhm.
So physics doesn't deal with this. Intelligence and biology are organized energy. They're organized in such a sophisticated way, we cannot measure it,
Mhm.
which is what's the power of a human being? Well, given their intelligence, if they're an engineer or a carpenter or an architect, they can design and create things that are very powerful.
Mhm.
So the what physics ignores, all of
Mhm.
physics ignores this, is that intelligence is organized energy.
Mhm.
Now
I
it's
think
like a puzzle.
intelligence, I think, is not the area of physics. I think it's fall under the category of psychology or statistic.
Or biology.
Yeah, biology, but it doesn't fall under category of physics. So it would
Well,
be
that means, but
wrong to.
how much of our universe, how
Hmm.
much of our reality, I should say
Hmm.
reality, is
Hmm.
based on the intelligence of ourselves or our animals, of
Hmm.
our of the people who designed the tractors and houses. A
Hmm.
large part of our reality
Hmm.
is based on intelligence, and
Hmm.
physics totally ignores like over 50% of our reality.
Hmm.
So physics is not a comprehensive science
Hmm.
because it cannot measure
Hmm.
intelligence.
Yes.
But intelligence is very powerful.
Hmm.
I mean, look at between us and the tiger.
Hmm.
Are there more people or more tigers?
More people.
Of course. But how much stronger physically is a tiger than a human being? A lot.
Yes.
I would say almost 50 times stronger than a human being is a tiger,
Or 100 times stronger than us.
or 100 times.
Yes.
So why did we win? Why are human beings in power and not tigers? Because of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So the tiger has its energy and its muscles,
Mm-hmm.
and we have
But does.
our energy and intelligence, where we can make a
Mm-hmm.
gun, we can
Mm-hmm.
organize a group of people. Do tigers organize? Do tigers go in a pack of 5 or 10 or 20? No,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have the intelligence to coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a wolf has the intelligence. A wolf can
Mm-hmm.
be in a pack of 5, 10, or 20, but then they
Mm-hmm.
can coordinate with us and become a dog.
Mm-hmm.
So, intelligence is basically organized energy. The tiger has the energy in its body, and we have
Mm-hmm.
the energy in our intelligence.
You know. Mm-hmm.
And the
So.
key word here is organized. It's
Mm-hmm.
organized energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I want to say is the soul or the spirit of a human being is organized intelligence. But it's a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It can fall apart and you have to reassemble it.
Mm-hmm.
So the
So
Hindus
the
talk
question.
about reincarnation,
So
and
the
I talk,
question is. So the question is, if intelligence is the organized energy, so what is the source of this organized energy? Where are we getting it
that's a
from?
deep question. I can't answer that. That's
Okay.
that's that's beyond my intelligence. That's beyond my
Okay.
organized energy. There is
So
some
because
source to it.
mhm, mhm. Because it's a very valid question. I think in my view, in my limited understanding, the reason I asked you this question is because I thought you would have a better answer. I think we, all of the world, all the people in the world, the intelligence, they may have different intelligence. Some people are, I think, as you said earlier, that is intelligence is more relevant to the culture. If we have different culture, religious, ethnicity, and different regional geographical backgrounds, so our intelligence by uh, is shaped is structured into different fields because of our surrounding, our geography, our experiences. So in the origin of the source of energy is the same, is the universe, is the energy of the universe. I think
Yeah,
I don't know
very
whether I'm
powerful energy. Let me
uh
give you.
very
Let me
poor.
get back to. Let me get back to globalization.
Okay.
People, in are facing war in the Middle East
Mhm,
because particularly United States and Britain want to
mhm,
control the oil energy, right? The
mhm,
the oil wars, where even now United States is in Syria controlling an oil field.
mhm,
But what if human intelligence was more energy?
mhm,
It would be more important to control human intelligence than oil.
mhm, mhm,
And I'm saying modern globalization is trying to control human intelligence.
mhm,
And well, I mean, you could say the source of energy of intelligence is fear created
mhm.
from mortality. I,
Yes.
I, I think we have to be smarter because we are mortal,
Mhm,
subject to injury and death. So, yes, we
mhm,
have to increase our intelligence to live longer and avoid
mhm,
injury.
mhm,
But I don't think we should assume a whale that can live 200 or 300 years of age
mhm,
or longer is not intelligent because
mhm,
they're able to navigate in an ocean which has very little signposts or mountains. They're able to navigate and find each other and survive on a global ocean scale, which requires a
mhm,
lot of intelligence,
mhm,
particularly given killer whales and great white sharks. So it's a different world with a different level of intelligence. And we do have to wonder, because I saw this as a child, a lot of really intelligent people in history, particularly scientists,
mhm,
lived a long time. I mean, like the
mhm,
founders of the American Revolution, when people were dying in their 40s and 50s, lived to be from 60 to 80 years of age. They lived 50% longer than the average person.
mhm,
So intelligence is related to survival. And I think that's why we survive better than the tiger, because
mhm,
we're more intelligent than the tiger. But what I
mhm,
wanted to say with globalization, the real energy is not oil.
mhm,
The real energy is intelligence, and corporations are trying to control people's intelligence.
mhm,
And once we understand that, we then understand people like Bill Gates and why they're philanthropists. They're still imperialists, which
mhm,
is just still colonizing people, but the
mhm,
resource that they're trying to control is not oil, it's
mhm,
intelligence.
mhm. So
So mine, mine,
you were going to talk about the source of energy and the Middle East, the oil. So we should get back to that point. I think
yeah.
you were interrupted.
Besides control of oil,
Mhm,
you have control of religion by Christianity, Judaism, and
mhm,
Islam,
mhm,
and they're controlling intelligence.
mhm,
So the Roman Empire went from controlling mining resources. The Roman Empire, we covered this, invaded
mhm,
Spain and England in order to get tin For
Mhm.
bronze, tin was really important, and there's very few places where you can get tin. So
Mhm.
Spain and England was important to the Romans in order for them to have their weapons and their machinery and their
Mhm.
boats. They
Mhm.
needed tin. So mining areas took on significance, but the real mining is human mines. So the
Mhm.
Roman Empire changed from soldiers conquering England and conquering Spain and then having prisoners of war work the mines. They went into a religion, which was Catholicism, to control the mind because the mind is more energy.
Mhm.
Controlling the mind is controlling the greater resource of energy. So we're not taught that the mind is energy and the mind
Mhm.
is organizing. We're talk about People talk about the soul being reincarnated, and I say no, that's not correct.
Mhm.
What happens, and you see this in a lot of people, as they get older, the organization of their mind begins
Mhm.
to collapse. Their
Mhm.
their soul or their intelligence begins falling apart. They start forgetting things. They start
Mhm.
losing their reasoning. Alzheimer's disease,
Mhm.
senility. So it's
Mhm.
not that the soul transmigrates;
Mhm.
it falls apart and reassembles. I think a
Mhm.
soul is largely a person's home, which is their
Mhm.
family, their house. That's where your intelligence is how you organize your family and your life.
Mhm.
And as you get older, that may fall apart, which is your intelligence is going to have to reassemble at some point. So I don't see it as the transmigration of souls. I see it as the falling apart of the soul and it reassembling. And intelligence does that. It's like I could have trained, or you or anyone, as a
Mhm.
shoemaker, as someone who repairs shoes and put soles and new heels on a shoe. But
Mhm.
today it's cheaper for people to buy a new shoe than to repair it. Now, if you got
Mhm.
expensive shoes, you would do it. So a lot of shoemakers
Are
or
out of the business.
went out of business.
Yes.
And the same with tailors. There's so many
Mhm.
different sizes and productions. You used to have a tailor cut to the cloth to fit your body,
Mhm.
and that got replaced by mass
By
production.
industries. Yes.
So what happens to that skill? That skill falls apart, but different aspects have to be reassembled. Now, why I say that, and I
Mhm.
agree with physics,
Mhm.
energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Mhm.
Repeat that. Energy
Mhm.
cannot be created or destroyed. That's the conservation of energy and mass.
Yes.
Einstein said mass could be converted into energy. It's not totally true
Mhm.
because we don't really have mass, which is usually protons and electrons.
Mhm.
They don't decay, and that's
Mhm.
most of mass. A
Mhm.
proton and electron equals a neutron.
Mhm.
The binding energy, which is called a neutrino, the
Mhm.
binding energy can decay into pure energy. But if the soul is organized energy,
Mhm.
it means, according to physics, it cannot be created or
Mhm.
destroyed.
Yes.
And what I say
Can
is
be
that's true, but it can be
transformed.
disassembled and reassembled.
Yes.
Well, how we put our intelligence together may fail.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if we don't conceive of something correctly, our intelligence may fall apart. And
Mhm.
I saw this because I'm old now. I've seen my aunts and uncles and parents
Mhm.
mentally decay. And I
Mhm.
saw them mentally decay. And I don't believe it's just a physical disruption of their brain. I saw there was too much dishonesty in their lives.
Mhm.
I saw they believed things that were not true.
Mm-hmm.
So the more lies a person believes, the more likely is their intelligence or their soul likely to fall apart. So if I
Mm-hmm.
want to control another person,
Mm-hmm. You
I
have to
want to
control their
weaken
mind.
them.
Yes,
If
mentally.
you want to control a person, you weaken them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the globalists today are spreading propaganda or lies to weaken people so they don't have the energy to resist their control. So
Mm-hmm.
propaganda, which is
So
lies,
in other words, the beliefs and religions, they are also playing the same role of weakening the minds of people.
yes,
So when they are weakened psychologically, they are lost. So you can easily control them.
yes. So propaganda, whether corporate science, because we're not hearing science. Bill
Mm-hmm.
Gates is not a doctor. So when he talks about viruses or vaccines, he has
Mm-hmm.
no expertise,
Mm-hmm.
but he is an imperialist.
Mm-hmm.
He is a globalist. So
Mm-hmm.
the globalists, just like Rome controlled Catholicism,
Mm-hmm.
just like religion controlled people's minds, today corporate science,
Mm-hmm.
which is fraudulent, is controlling people's minds and weakening them. So
Mm-hmm.
people can be controlled if their organized energy, their intelligence is fed propaganda or lies. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's religion or corporate science, people are weakened so they can be exploited or damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And if you view energy as intelligence and intelligence as energy, the better you organize your thinking,
So
the more
speaking of
realistic is your thinking, the
speaking of
more power
energy,
you
and
have.
we have a very interesting comment here. Check it out.
Yeah, when alchemy was split into different factions, religion, science, mathematics, it was the beginning of specialization, which weakened alchemy as a whole by design. Well, we look at alchemy as a Gnostic subject, which is Gnostic as knowledge, as an integrated subject, and it got split into different studies that were not related to each other. It weakened the organization of the mind because it's
Mm-hmm.
separated. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like weakening any structure if you fragment it, if you actually put sections in it. And of course, human knowledge has been divided into physics, biology, literature,
Mm-hmm.
painting, music, and so has weakened it when
Mm-hmm.
we go back to the ancient Greeks. All those subjects were called philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they weren't called alchemy that much. It was called philosophy. So philosophers studied biology, music, physics, everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And today it's been specialized where the connection, but we're dealing with basically in politics the left wing and the right wing. The left
Mm-hmm.
wing is materialistic and atheistic, and the right wing is monotheist, religious, and military,
Mm-hmm.
which is a strange combination. But we're either supposed to be atheists or
For
we're supposed to be
monotheism.
religious.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to have organized intelligence. It's supposed to be split into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you call it alchemy, Gnosticism, or philosophy, yes, a person should be educated in general knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's good if they specialize, but the
Mm-hmm.
way the knowledge is organized is to weaken human beings because the fields are not connected.
Mm-hmm.
Physics should be more connected to biology,
Mm-hmm.
which is biology recognizes it takes energy to store information in the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
That information storage is a form of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a few physicists recognize this and they use information theory to describe physical properties, which is can be very accurate, but we usually don't have integration of knowledge. I actually
Mhm,
think the biologists and chemists are further along than the physicists. I think the physicists have moved into a dead end,
mhm,
particularly at CERN in Switzerland. And the reason
mhm,
being is a misuse of mathematical language. In chemistry, we have two different arrows pointing in
mhm,
two different directions to show chemical reactions, meaning the
mhm,
equation could go one direction or another. So
mhm,
E equals mc squared is not true. It should have
mhm,
two arrows. There should not be an equal sign. Energy is
mhm,
not equal to mass, and mass is not equal to energy. The equal sign is an incorrect sign. It should be a double arrow that energy could be changed into mass and mass could be
and math
changed
can
into
be.
energy.
Mhm.
Now, we
What
don't
about?
really totally know that because we're usually
Mhm,
dealing with small particles and
mhm,
bonding being turned into energy. We have two fundamental so called stable particles or
mhm,
standing wave formations, which is the proton and an electron. And
mhm,
those two can be combined to a neutron. And
mhm,
the binding power of an electron with a proton and a neutron, I think it's called a neutrino or an anti-neutrino. Um, Electron neutrino, I think it's called. But
mhm,
whatever it's called, it only has a temporary mass.
mhm,
Only a proton and an electron has a stable mass. Everything else decays. In fact, you take the neutron outside of the nucleus, it's going to decay like in 10 minutes or something, 30
mhm,
minutes. So, what does that mean? It means these particles, so called particles, at CERN, which is the super collider in Switzerland, may not exist. You're
mhm,
transforming the energy of collisions, and you may be transforming the energy of collisions into a Higgs boson. So a Higgs
mhm,
boson may not exist. You
mhm,
created it. Because you see a particle in a super collider doesn't mean that particle exists. It just means
mhm,
it could have been created. You
mhm.
don't know.
So, so
So
when you say the physics has reached the dead end, so what do you mean by that? What about
because
the
they don't
theory?
deal with consciousness. Consciousness is a major property of the universe, and let me explain that. It takes me
Mhm,
about 5 minutes to explain it. So,
mhm.
what's
So,
consciousness?
so
Consciousness is intelligence, right?
Mhm,
What's intelligence is organized energy.
mhm,
Okay, we got that? So
okay,
physicists don't deal with consciousness. What's consciousness?
mhm,
Consciousness is intelligence, which is organized energy, and physicists
mhm,
ignore this,
mhm,
which is a galaxy is organized energy so the stars don't collide with each other.
mhm.
If the
But on the
universe
other,
was based on if the universe was based on a big bang, what
mhm,
happens in an explosion? Things
mhm,
collide and break each other.
mhm,
But you have a huge galaxy. What is a galaxy? Organized energy. What is a solar system?
mhm.
Organized energy. What's
Oh,
organized energy?
mhm.
Intelligence.
Okay, okay, I get that you're talking about it philosophically, but on the other hand, the word physics is come from the physical objects, from the physical things, and the material, the only thing that you can see or touch. On the other hand, the consciousness and the intelligence is unmeasurable, so you cannot touch your intelligence, you cannot feel it, so it doesn't
Well,
fall
you
under the.
can, but this is the interesting thing
Okay.
because physics is not only deal with the physical world, it deals with
Hmm.
energy. Energy is a major part of physics.
Mhm.
maybe not part of the word physics for physical,
Mhm.
but energy
Mhm.
still is a major part of physics.
Mhm.
Organized energy, which is consciousness, cannot be measured physically. It has to be measured, and we do this all the time, by other consciousness.
Mhm.
Organized energy measures organized energy, which is I assess your intelligence, you assess my intelligence. And
Mhm.
it has to be a guess. Why it has to be the guess? Because the way it's organized is always changing. Intelligence is always changing and it's relative to the environment.
Mhm.
So, since intelligence spreads, it's a spreading energy, it's constantly changing. How do you measure something that's constantly changing? The answer is you can't. You make a guess.
Mhm.
So that's where averages come in and stuff. And we see this a little bit in quantum mechanics. And
Mhm.
they make a big deal out of quantum mechanics, but it's
Mhm.
a statistical guess. Where's the
Mhm.
location of an electron? What's its energy going to be? What's the size of its wavefront? Will it
Mhm.
collapse? These are all statistical guesses. And when we get
Mhm.
to pure intelligence, which is organized energy, we're guessing because organized energy is like the solar system. The
Mhm.
position of the planets are constantly changing.
Mhm.
So we have to make a probability guess given the past behavior. So behavior is very similar to intelligence. We look at the
Mhm.
past behavior, but when we're dealing with physical stuff that's not alive, the behavior
Mhm.
doesn't change much. When we're dealing with something alive, which has more organized energy, the behavior is constantly changing.
Mhm.
So we're usually dealing with mass and energy, and physics ignores organized energy, which is consciousness. Now I'll explain this in terms of the universe.
I
The
think
universe
I think
has
physics I think physics deals with the energy of matters and physical things. The only thing that has physicality or any object that has a mass only deals with those things. I think it would be wrong to the physics or unwise to blame physics if they don't study or they don't deal with consciousness or the conscious energy.
well, they need to be humble. They need to admit that they don't understand the nature of the universe.
Okay.
The problem isn't that we are concentrated on
Hmm.
physical measurement. The problem
Hmm.
is when they claim they understand the origin of the universe was a big bang. This is nonsense. They don't understand it. And they don't
Hmm.
have the humility or the intelligence to say, no, we don't understand it.
Hmm.
And part of it is the universe has this property. And I came to this, and so did Rupert Sheldrake, and he calls it a self-organizing property.
Hmm.
And he says there is a resonance between organizations that are similar.
Hmm.
And I say it's about harmony. The universe seeks, the property of the universe, to reduce
Hmm.
collisions. So throughout the universe, we see galaxies and solar systems. And what's the
Hmm.
purpose of a galaxy or a solar system? Is to reduce collisions, to reduce the waste of energy.
Hmm.
So intelligence, like the car mechanic builds their intelligence, is to become more efficient, to have less
Hmm.
collisions, which means to fix the car with the least amount of activity,
Hmm.
to be able to direct or focus your energy. So the
Hmm.
universe can focus energy.
Hmm.
It can self-organize, which Rupert Sheldrake calls it,
Hmm.
and it can communicate that organization.
Hmm.
We're organized matter and energy, and we can communicate that
Mhm.
and have a certain amount of rapport or resonance with
Mhm.
something of a similar organization.
Mhm.
So the universe has vast complex levels of organization
Mhm.
that are not the result of random activity.
Mhm.
So the universe has what we could call intelligent organization. I wouldn't
Mhm.
call it intelligent design
Mhm.
because it's reorganizing itself constantly, the universe. For
Mhm.
example, we're not in one galaxy. The, the solar
Mhm.
system of the Earth and its sun is in
Mhm.
Sagittarius Minor and the Milky Way.
Mhm.
Whether it's moving away from Sagittarius Minor and being captured by the Milky Way, or moving away from the Milky Way and part of Sagittarius, dwarf Sagittarius, collapsing and becoming an independent solar system outside of a galaxy, we don't know. The
Mhm.
problem with physicists, and I'm going to say this, is they're
Okay.
liars. They
It's
refuse
okay.
to They
Oh.
refuse to admit when they don't understand something. They're just going to bullcrap you, make up a story, say this is how the sun has all its energy. They don't have humility. They won't say, we really don't know. We're making our
Mhm.
best guess, but we really don't know. They won't say that. They're dishonest.
Mhm. Okay.
And and that's an important point to make. Because I think what's important, we don't want to give dishonest people all this power because we'll have Bill Gates telling us how to live our life. And we have all these people that claim knowledge, like Bill Gates, who claims vaccines are good for people when there's a lot of evidence they do harm to a lot of people. We don't need a high priesthood or pope or cleric. We don't have to have someone telling us what the truth is. We need freedom of choice. So when a physicist or Bill Gates says this is the truth and we have to believe them, no, we don't have to believe them because they're liars and they're known liars. And that's the problem. Okay. Suck says all science is reverse engineering, as we must destroy in order to create. As a result of that, there's an inevitable negative impact from having to destroy first. We initiate collisions. Well, I think that's a tendency. I think we have to be careful, and we do have to express stuff as an is or a thesis, but we're giving a viewpoint, we're giving an aspect how things work or some things work for some kind. And it's true a lot of physics is reverse engineering, taking something apart and figuring out how it fits together. And,
Mhm.
um, but when you're at the collision levels of a super collider, you don't know if you're taking something apart or you're creating particles,
Mhm.
which is you put enough energy, according to Einstein, you could create mass. So in a super collider, we don't know whether we're taking something apart by collisions or creating something by collisions.
Mhm.
So, but what we do want, focus, Sandra, is organized and unfocused is disorganized. What we
Mhm.
do want is humility and truth from people, and our leaders are lying to us
Mhm.
because they're telling us stuff that's a guess as
Mhm.
truth.
Mhm. So my question, I think, was never answered. What is the source of energy? And
Oh,
my
people say,
theory,
yeah.
mhm. My theory was that we all have the same source of energy, and the universe is the whole universe is the source of our intelligence, is the source of our uh, of the question was, what is the source of our uh, uh, our intelligence? And the source of intelligence is the universe. The universe provides us uh, energy or intelligence, and we get that's how we are connected with the universe and nature. Is my theory or my guess.
Well, that's a good guess. I mean, I feel a lot of my intelligence comes from
Mhm,
someplace else.
mhm,
I organize a certain amount of what I read and experience, but I
mhm,
do have inspiration. And
mhm,
I know most of the great scientists had inspiration. So
mhm,
I think your description is a very good guess.
mhm,
Doesn't mean it's absolute. It
mhm,
means you're describing a process that may exist. What is the
mhm,
universe? What is God, or what is divine, or what's
mhm,
inspiration? We as
mhm,
human beings do not have the intelligence yet to understand the process. I mean,
mhm,
you may be correct. The
mhm,
universe has one source of intelligence, and we are tied to or connected to this source of intelligence, but we don't
mhm.
understand how that works.
Mhm. Okay, let me elaborate my point that, for instance, we are here from this earth. We are born here on earth, and we die here on earth, and nothing goes out of the earth or the our universe, the planet we live in, or nothing comes in. The whole system, it's been going on for centuries. People are born and they're dying. They are born and they are dying. The whole cycle of life and death, it continues, and nothing goes out, nothing comes in, and
Well,
it seems like
I have to disagree with that.
okay.
Um, NASA has observed lightning going to outer space, and I actually think a lot of souls or the consciousness of people leave the planet as
Hmm.
lightning, which
Hmm.
is a soul is equal generally to a power of a lightning strike, which is about
Hmm.
10 million,
No,
probably
my
million.
point, I'm talking about the physical thing, and things, they stay here. On the other hand, the spiritual aspect of it, or the energy, it keeps on, or how could you say, the soul, the thing that keeping us alive, and it's a very interesting thing. I think this is our soul has the energy of the universe, and that give the energy of the universe, it provides us intelligence, and that's how we are connected with the nature and the universe. And I don't know whether I'm making any sense or not, but that's how.
Sure,
Mm,
it's
mhm,
basically you're presenting ancient Egyptian philosophy.
mhm,
The soul was described as Ka, and
mhm,
Ka was animation
mhm,
or the motivation or the spirit being the movement.
mhm,
So the soul, and we see this in Moses' thinking, the
mhm,
soul is spirits brooding or stirring above the waters,
mhm,
which the soul is the animation, the
mhm,
animus. The,
mhm,
the, the Latin calls it animus, anima.
mhm, mhm,
And that's an Egyptian point of view. And I think the word God comes from Egyptian, from the word
mhm,
ka, meaning spirit or soul. So we get the word God from Ka, which is the ancient Egyptian understanding of spirit or soul, that everything has a spirit or soul.
mhm,
And I have a different point, which is
mhm,
everything has an organization, and the organization falls apart and reassembles.
mhm,
So I see the soul more as organizing rather than animated. So I even see a rock as organized.
mhm,
So I take Egyptian a little bit further. I see a rock as having a soul. Not
mhm,
very advanced,
mhm,
not advanced at all,
mhm,
but it still holds together. It's still organized.
mhm,
So the soul is what is the pattern, the intelligence that organizes things together. So a lot of people are in a coma. They can't move, they can't talk, they can't blink their eye. But when
Mhm.
they wake up from the coma, they relate everything that was happening. They heard and saw and smelt everything, but they
Mhm.
couldn't communicate it. Their body was like a rock,
Mhm.
but their perception was still organized.
Mhm.
And we found that out in psychology. A lot of people who we thought had no intelligence,
Mhm.
when they recovered from the damage, could totally describe what happened in the earlier part of life. We, our intelligence has a connection to our body, and that connection can be damaged. That's the problem with the vaccines and the fluoride. Our
Mhm.
soul or spirit can exist with our body being a rock and not moving in a
Mhm.
coma, but yet our spirit can be fully conscious.
Mhm.
So I disagree a little bit with the Egyptians. I don't see the spirit or soul as the animus or the animation. I see it
Mhm.
as the organization.
Mhm.
It's holding the organization together. It takes a lot to hold the body together. And
Mhm.
that connection between our soul and our body, like in a coma, can be broken. But our soul is still conscious. Our
Mhm.
soul is still continuing, though it can't move anything. Can't move anything at all because we're in a
Mhm.
coma, but it's still fully aware. But I agree with you. There seems to be a universal source.
Mhm.
There seems to be a
That
source to our intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's why we get creative ideas, we get innovative ideas, and the thing that tells us to do something, and the thing that tells us not to, and that's how, for instance, we can wake up at night, we have dreams, and we have the foretelling, or what do we how you see foreseeing the future. I think it's the universe. It communicates with us if if we are a bit sensitive about nature, if we pay attention to it.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I want to
Hmm.
draw the conclusion. The
Hmm.
corporations,
Okay.
the imperialists, are now
Hmm.
trying to control intelligence
Hmm.
rather than just control oil or
Hmm.
control lithium or control transportation routes. The
Hmm.
governments and the corporations are trying to control people's minds and their
Hmm.
intelligence so
Hmm.
that we're
It's
not allowed to think on our own. We're
hmm.
being we're being exploited. Our intelligence is being manipulated by the mainstream media, by politicians and leaders, and by these
Hmm.
imperialists like Bill Gates. Bill Gates should
Hmm.
not be seen as a philanthropist. He's an
Hmm.
imperialist. He's an
Hmm.
oligarch trying to
Hmm.
control people's intelligence.
Hmm. Or intelligence, the modern globalization, intelligence in the modern globalization means conformity. You have to conform with the norms of uh, the technology, or whatever the mainstream education system and mainstream technology says, mainstream information system, whatever they say, you have to conform with it. If you conform, then okay, you're intelligent being. Otherwise, you're not.
Yeah,
I
that's an
think that's
important
how.
point.
Yes. And that's how the control, that's how I think uh, the globalization in terms of in terms of control intelligence means. And we have it's been around about an hour, and we have covered a lot of things. And though I may not I don't disagree with all the things, but most of them I agree. And thank you, Ed, for joining us. And it was wonderful having you, and you have helped me to connect the dots. And thank you, Zach, Ebak, Sandra, and other people who have been watching us. And thank you so much, Sandra, Zach, Ebak, for your comments. And you performed really well. and you gave us very good hints to talk about. Okay, and thank you, and have a good night or
Okay.
evening or
Good
day,
night. Good
whatever,
afternoon.
wherever you are.